Images that changed the world. These photos changed your society, but you won't just see them. You'll understand the powerful context behind each image, why they mattered so much, and what impact they had on history. Some shocked nations, others sparked movements. Let's dive in and explore the moments that shaped our world, frame by frame. Let's get started. Before we reveal the first image, let's have some context. In the spring of 1936, the United States was still in the grip of the Great Depression. The stock market crash of 1929 had triggered a decade-long economic collapse that left millions of Americans unemployed, homeless, and hungry. Drought and dust storms had ravaged much of the rural West, particularly in states like Oklahoma, Kansas, and parts of California, where failed crops and broken dreams pushed entire families to the brink. The Dust Bowl wasn't just a climate disaster, it was a human crisis, forcing desperate people to leave behind their homes, their land, and their sense of identity in search of work, food, and dignity. Into this backdrop stepped Dorothea Lange, a photographer working for the Farm Security Administration, FSA, a New Deal agency created to document the conditions of rural America. The goal wasn't just to take pictures, it was to tell stories through images, stories that would stir public empathy and push political leaders toward reform. Lange was no stranger to hardship herself, having suffered from polio as a child and walked with a limp all her life. Perhaps that's why she saw people others might overlook in March of that year. Lange was driving through Nipimo, California, when she spotted a makeshift camp on the side of the road. Despite being exhausted and ready to head home, something compelled her to stop. She got out of her car and approached a woman sitting under a crude tent made of canvas and sticks, surrounded by children. What she saw in the woman's face would become one of the most enduring symbols of American resilience and suffering. The woman was Florence Owens Thompson. Though Lange did not know her name at the time, Thompson and her children had been living on boiled vegetables and birds the children managed to catch. They were stranded, their car had broken down, and there was no work in sight. Lange took 6 photographs in about 10 minutes, each one capturing different angles of Thompson with her children, but it was the close-up her hand on her chin, eyes staring into the distance, 2 children clinging to her shoulders, that became iconic. The image, now known as Migrant Mother, is deceptively simple. A mother, seated, with 2 children turning their heads away from the camera, and an infant in her lap, swaddled in rags. But every detail is charged with meaning: her furrowed brow, the slight pursing of her lips, the tension in her hand pressing against her cheek. These elements convey a profound mix of exhaustion, worry, strength, and tenderness. Lange recalled that she didn't even ask the woman's name or background, and yet the photo spoke louder than any caption ever could. It was published in newspapers and circulated widely, becoming a rallying image for the plight of America's poor. It also helped draw immediate attention to the dire conditions in the migrant camps, prompting government officials to rush aid. To the region, Migrant Mother quickly became more than just a photograph. It became a symbol of a generation's suffering and survival. It encapsulates the emotional cost of economic collapse and the way it falls hardest on the shoulders of mothers and children. The backdrop may be one of dust and scarcity, but the photo radiates something timeless: maternal strength, quiet endurance, and an unspoken bond that holds a family together even when the world seems to fall apart. The image has been analyzed in museums, classrooms, and political discussions for decades. Some critics point to how Lange composed the photo to tell a specific narrative, cropping out certain elements to focus the viewer's attention. Others reflect on how Thompson, the subject, was never fully credited or compensated for the fame the image brought. In later interviews, Thompson herself expressed mixed feelings, pride in representing the hardships her generation endured. and frustration at being frozen forever in that moment of vulnerability. And yet, Migrant Mother continues to resonate because it captures something universally understood: the quiet heroism of motherhood, the uncertainty of poverty, the quiet determination etched into every line of the subject's face. It reminds us that economic policies are not just numbers on a chart. They are decisions that ripple into homes, shape childhoods, and define futures taken in 1936. Dorothea Lange's image perfectly encapsulates both the dignity of her subject and a deep sense of desperation. Framed by her children, brow furrowed, clothes threadbare, Lange's Migrant Mother suggests an epic struggle and yet conveys the tenderness and intimacy of motherhood. It is both intensely human and powerfully symbolic. Migrant Mother has become an iconic reminder of the destitution and poverty visited on so many ordinary families in the wake of the Great Depression. It is a reminder, too, of the very real human consequences when economic policies go wrong and economies collapse. Now let's see the photo. Before we reveal second image, let's have some background. It was February 1945, and the Pacific theater of World War II was reaching one of its bloodiest climaxes. American forces had launched a brutal assault on the island of Iwo Jima, a volcanic outpost held by tens of thousands of entrenched Japanese troops. The battle was expected to last a few days. Instead, it dragged on for over a month, costing nearly 7,000 American lives and more than 20,000 Japanese. The terrain was unforgiving, the enemy hidden in bunkers and tunnels carved deep into the island's rock. Every inch of ground was paid for in blood. The small island held immense strategic value. It was close enough to Japan to serve as a launching point for future air raids, and capturing it would give the Allies a crucial foothold. But the cost of that capture would be staggering. Amid the smoke, the shelling, and the chaos, a group of U.S. Marines reached the summit of Mount Suribachi on February 23rd. They planted a flag to signal victory, but that was not the image that would change history. Joe Rosenthal, an Associated Press photographer covering the Pacific Campaign, arrived shortly after that first flag was raised. Upon hearing that a second, larger flag was about to be planted, one that could be seen more clearly from below, he scrambled up the mountain with his bulky camera, exhausted and unsure if he'd make it in time. What happened next would produce one of the most enduring images in American history. Rosenthal didn't have much time to prepare. As 5 Marines and 1 Navy corpsman hoisted the flagpole upright against a strong wind, he instinctively raised his camera and snapped the shutter. He didn't look through the viewfinder, didn't compose the shot, didn't even know what he'd captured. When you take a picture like that, you don't come away saying you got a great shot. You don't know. He would later reflect the resulting photograph. Raising the flag on Iwo Jima is often mistaken for a pose shot because of its near-perfect composition. 6 men straining in unison, flag bending in the wind, captured an angle that suggests motion, effort, and glory. The soldiers are anonymous, their faces obscured, which somehow adds to the power of the moment. It becomes less about the individual and more about the collective sacrifice. Published just days after it was taken, the image exploded across American newspapers and magazines. It became a rallying point for a nation weary of war, a symbol of unity, courage, and ultimate victory. It won the Pulitzer Prize for photography in the same year, an extraordinary recognition for a photograph taken in the heat of battle, under impossible conditions. But as with many icons, its story is more complex than it first appears. Many critics have pointed out that raising the flag on Iwo Jima walks the fine line between journalism and propaganda. It emerged at a time when the U.S. government needed to bolster public morale and fund a costly war effort. The image was used almost immediately to promote war bond drives, appearing on posters, billboards, and in recruitment offices across the country. Unlike images such as Napalm Girl, which lay bare the horrors of war, Rosenthal's photo seems to do the opposite. It elevates the act of war to something noble, almost mythic. It doesn't show the carnage or the suffering that occurred moments before and after. It freezes a moment of perceived triumph, stripped of the bloodshed surrounding it over time. The photograph's legacy has deepened, becoming both a national icon and a subject of scrutiny. The Marine Corps' War Memorial in Arlington, Virginia, is based on Rosenthal's image, carved in bronze and towering over visitors as a tribute to the American fighting spirit. And yet, for the families of the 6 men in the picture, 3 of whom would die shortly after the photo was taken, it also serves as a reminder of the human cost behind the heroism. The power of the image lies not just in its visual strength, but in its timing. It captured the moment when America, exhausted by years of global conflict, needed a symbol of victory and hope. It gave the war a face, not of anguish, but of resolve. It helped shape a narrative of inevitable American dominance, a nation ascending through sacrifice. Still, it's important to remember that the photo's clarity was born of chaos. It was the product of a hurried moment, a spontaneous reaction, by a photographer who nearly missed his shot. Had Rosenthal hesitated, shifted slightly, or blinked, we might never have seen this image at all. Joe Rosenthal's Pulitzer Prize-winning image of American troops raising the U.S. flag in Iwo Jima seems to convey just that, a sense of glorious triumph in a struggle against all odds. Almost propagandist in nature, the image has become iconic both as an image of American victory and as a portent of impending American military supremacy. If Napalm Girl is a perfect anti-war picture, raising the flag at Iwo Jima seems to glorify battle. Amazingly, Rosenthal almost missed the shot and actually took the photo in such a hurry that he didn't have time to look through the viewfinder. When you take a picture like that, you don't come away saying you got a great shot. You don't know, Rosenthal recalled. Now, let's see the photo. Before we reveal this third image, let's have some context. Political power grows out of the barrel of the gun, declared Mao Zedong in 1938, reducing the complex machinery of governance to the stark logic of force, a view echoed across countless revolutions and wars in the 20th century, where rifles and artillery often spoke louder than ballots. Fast forward 3 decades, and the mood in the United States had shifted dramatically. A new generation weary of conscription and nuclear brinkmanship embraced a different mantra, flower power, which promised that peace could be achieved not through intimidation, but through empathy, music, and non-violent protest. Their colorful gatherings became living counterpoints to military parades, their slogans an antidote to martial rhetoric. The ideological collision between those 2 visions of power reached a poignant crescendo on October 21, 1967, when tens of thousands converged on the Pentagon to demand an end to the Vietnam War. Among them was 17-year-old Jan Rose Casimir, a high school student who had traveled from suburban Maryland to voice her dissent. She carried nothing but a single chrysanthemum, a delicate bloom chosen precisely because it looked absurd next to bayonets. French photojournalist Marc Reboud, a veteran of Magnum photos and already famed for capturing decisive moments on the streets of Paris and Hanoi, wandered through the crowd in search of a frame that could distill the sprawling protest into a single image. He spotted Casimir as she stepped toward a line of National Guardsmen, their M14 rifles fitted with fixed bayonets, their faces impassive beneath steel helmets. Reboud raised his Leica and pressed the shutter at the instant her outstretched flower hovered inches from the gunpoints. The resulting photograph, often titled The Ultimate Confrontation Vietnam, or simply Flower and Bayonet, freezes that fragile exchange. On one side, a wall of uniformed discipline and state authority. On the other, a teenage girl whose serene expression conveys both courage and vulnerability. Her daisy-shaped chrysanthemum appears almost luminous against the matte gray of rifle barrels, an ephemeral gesture challenging the permanence of violence. Unlike many iconic war photographs that emphasize carnage or despair, Rebound's image communicates resistance by inversion. Instead of showing bodies broken by bullets, it shows weapons rendered momentarily useless by a flower. The picture became an instant emblem of the anti-war movement, reproduced in underground newspapers, peace march posters, and dorm room collages across the Western world, proving that symbolism could travel faster than gunfire. Critics at the time accused the photograph of naivete, arguing that flowers could not stop bombs falling on Hanoi or Saigon. Yet its power lay precisely in its idealism. It reminded viewers that dissent could be both visually striking and morally disarming. The image reframed protest not as chaotic confrontation, but as disciplined compassion, a rhetorical stance that resonated deeply among draft-age youth. For the soldiers in the frame, the moment was reportedly tense. Orders forbade them from lowering rifles, but some later admitted that the flower's presence unsettled them, highlighting their own reluctance to turn weapons on fellow Americans. Rebound's lens thus captured a silent dialogue. Guns spoke of duty and hierarchy. The flower spoke of conscience and humanity, and the thin air between them crackled with possibilities. Over half a century later, the photograph endures because it offers a template for peaceful resistance. Modern climate activists, civil rights marchers, and even protesters in authoritarian states have echoed Kashmir's gesture, holding flowers, books, or blank signs before armored police. Each repetition reaffirms the belief that vulnerability can expose the absurdity of brute force, that a well-timed symbol can travel farther than a bullet. Mark Rebound's 1967 image of a female protester holding a flower as she faces a line of guns and bayonets has become an icon for the flower power movement and for peaceful opposition to the Vietnam War, reminding us that moral authority can bloom even in the shadow of weaponry. Now let's see the photo.